a biopic about the rise of superstar Michael Jackson from his early life in Gary, Indiana to the release of his Bad album. On the surface, this is a formulaic, sugar-coated biopic. Almost everything was glossed over quickly because you cannot comprehensively cover the life of the greatest pop star of all time in 2 hours. To say Michael Jackson had a complicated life is an understatement. From a story perspective, this plays out like a kid who didn't write his term paper, and the night before he was due, he scanned Wikipedia and just laid out the highlights of Jackson's life in chronological order. Now, when it comes to the story and how the movie ended, I am in agreement with the critics that it didn't really have an ending and everything felt rushed. It felt like a part 1 of a 2-part story. But as a film lover, I really enjoyed the journey. Where the story was simple and formulaic, the execution by director Antoine Fuqua was excellent. Both actors who portrayed Michael Jackson in the movie channeled him perfectly, and in some scenes I felt like we were seeing the real Michael Jackson on screen. While Joe Jackson was known as a domineering, abusive father, he was a more complex person in real life. In Michael, he was a one-dimensional villain, and Colman Domingo played that part perfectly. He was menacing, and every time he was on screen, I was uncomfortable. The songs, costumes, and sets were all spot on. If you were a fan of Michael Jackson, there's a lot to like here. The movie was financed by the Jackson family, and because of that, Michael Jackson was portrayed as a nearly flawless man whose gifts came straight from God. And honestly, when the movie takes place, I think that was the general consensus of a lot of people around the world. Jackson's fall from grace didn't happen until several years after the timeline of this movie ended. So people who are saying the movie skipped all of that stuff are just plain wrong. It didn't skip over the controversy, it just hadn't happened yet. Now, if they make a sequel, and the second half also doesn't mention that, then we can talk. The movie centers on Michael Jackson, and because of that, the rest of the members of the Jackson 5 were just kind of there. They had no personality and no more than a few lines each. LaToya, his sister, is around, but she didn't really add much to the movie, and Janet, the second most famous Jackson, was completely missing and never even mentioned. Now, the movie started to dip its toe into seeing Jackson in the studio, creating the music that defined a generation, but I wanted so much more detail. We also got a little bit of perspective on Jackson's love for animals, which I had never connected the dots on before, and we briefly got some insight into why he chose to get plastic surgery. But again, it was the Cliff Notes version, and we never really dug below the surface. Even with my complaints, this was an excellent movie. You shouldn't be watching biopics to get 100% accurate details on the life of a person. Even the biggest superstars in the world have more dull days than interesting ones, and to fit an entire life into 2 hours, you can't do a deep dive on every single thing that happened. The goal of these movies is to entertain, and entertain it did. Jaafar Jackson, nephew of Michael Jackson, embodied Michael Jackson in a way that I didn't think was possible. The movie is worth watching for his performance alone. If you like Michael Jackson and you get enjoyment out of his music, there's no way that this will not entertain you. Masterfully acted and directed with near perfect recreations of some of the biggest moments in pop music history that are nearly indistinguishable from the real thing. If you want a more in-depth look at the Jackson family, read a biography or watch the 1990s miniseries. If you want to be entertained for 2 hours, watch this movie.